So one question I get asked a lot is, how do I have my bike set up for jibbing and trialsy stuff? Today I'm going to answer that question. And also today, as a treat, behind the camera I have Fraser Hand helping me film. Now before I do get onto the bike check, I just want to mention that this week's video was meant to be hardline, but as I'm sure many of you all know, it got cancelled. But we actually had an absolute rad time despite the rain, despite the wind. Red Bull actually looked after us so well. When the qualies were cancelled, instead of just hanging about all day, they treated us to a trip down a mine, a slate mine. Tim, our guide, was an absolute character. Fraser got his hands dirty with a hammer and it was a great time. It was actually such an adventure as well. We ended up climbing up this 100-foot slope all clipped in. Real cool time. I'll link to the company down below. Well worth a visit if you're in North Wales. After that, we went to the race itself. It was meant to be race day, and of course that got cancelled as well. Now, despite the wind, I actually got a treat. I'm afraid Fraser didn't get a chance to do this, but I got a ride in a helicopter and it was amazing. We got to see the course from above, and then we just went for a trip down the coast. I didn't realize how close we were, 100 miles an hour down there and back. It was unreal. So yeah, thanks so much to Fusion Media, Red Bull UK for making it a cool weekend despite no racing. And actually, I just realized we've set this up with the sun behind us, so let's do a switcheroo and I'll show you what I've done to my bike to make it way better for trials and jibbing. So before we get into suspension details, what PSI I'm running, firstly, I'm just going to start with the frame itself. Now this is a pivot. If you've been following my channel for a while, you may have seen the bike build video that I did on this, where I did explain a few reasons why I like this bike. But if you're new to the channel, this is an ideal jibbing bike, mainly because it's got smaller wheels. This is 27.5 inch. It is possible to do jibbing stuff and trials on bigger wheels. Chris Akerig is absolute proof of that. But if you have a choice, smaller wheels are better. So other than wheel size, this frame itself is decent as well because of the suspension travel. This has 140mm at the rear. Now it actually has 160 up front, which is a little bit longer than I would normally choose, but from using 140mm on my previous bikes, front and rear, an extra 20mm up front hasn't proved to be too much of an issue. The other thing I love about this frame is just how low slung the top tube is. In some instances, you really start to lean off the side of the bike, and having that extra clearance really does help. Also, this bike has a relatively short seat tube length and it's fully uninterrupted, which means I can completely slam my 200mm dropper post to get it fully out of the way. So I've told you about the features of this frame that makes it good for jibbing. Let's get onto the components, and we're going to start with the tyres. Up front, I'm running a Magic Mary by Schwalbe. This is a fairly aggressive tyre, but I don't want to compromise on grip because I still will be running this bike on the mountain bike trails, and having something aggressive, certainly in Scotland, is a real advantage. We just checked the pressure of that and it's at 18 PSI, which actually feels a lot lower than what I expected. This is a slightly thicker casing. I think it's a super gravity casing. I don't have an insert up front. At the back, I'm running something a little bit faster rolling because I'm mainly going to be riding this bike on rocks in the streets. So I wanted something that's just not going to have too much drag. This is a Hands Damp and it's a slightly lighter weight tyre. So I do have an insert in the back, and I just checked the pressure and it's 28 PSI. Now this bike actually came as standard with a 30-tooth chainring. And that's actually one thing I've swapped to a smaller one. I'm now running a 28-tooth chainring just for a little bit more ground clearance. This is a past Quest model from my side business AliExpress. It's a random brand, but it's actually a really cool chainring and comes with 2 removable bash guards. I've removed the top one because I'm right foot forward, so I've only got one on there to save a little bit more weight. And I've hit it plenty of times, and so far it's holding up quite nicely. Related to the chainring, the cranks themselves. Now I'm an advocate for shorter crank lengths, however, I've just kept the standard cranks on this. They're 175mm, which is fine. I do think shorter cranks are a little bit better, but it's not a big enough difference that I would want to change these just yet. As for the bar and stem, this is something that is completely standard on this bike. Traditionally with trials, a longer stem does help, but a bit like my front tyre choice, I don't want to have too much compromise for riding trails, so I've kept the standard bar and stem on this, which I believe is a 45mm stem and just a standard pivot carbon bars. One really important thing with jibbing is being able to get off the bike really easily and quickly if it goes wrong, because believe me, it will go wrong. So flat pedals are a must, and the grippier the better. Like I mentioned in my build video, I'm using what I consider to be the best pedals in the world by Scottish brand Pinned. These things are super grippy, super beefy, 5-year warranty on these things, highly recommended. Other than flat pedals, another thing that's actually really handy for jibbing and actually climbing as well, if you ever get a technical climb, having more engagement points in your hubs is such a helpful addition. So I've got i9 Hydra hubs on this bike with, what's it, 690 engagement points on the rear, which is insane. But that makes trials stuff so much easier because you don't have to cock your pedals back so far to get power, which aids control so much more than you might think. Another extremely important thing for trialsy jibbing especially is powerful brakes. And again, if you've seen this channel for a while, you know I'm a huge fan of the Hayes Dominion brakes, so no change here. So I've got Hayes Dominion A4 models with 203mm rotors front and rear, and actually I've got their semi-metallic pads for just a little bit more bite. So those are components, but how about the suspension setup? I actually don't know what PSI I'm running. I kind of just mess with it until it kind of works for me doing this kind of stuff. So I'm going to get my shock pump out and see what pressure I actually have and see how many clicks I've got. And that will give you some kind of idea of what works for me. And the rear, I'm running about 240 PSI, which is lots. So this bike at the minute is running very firm, but it still feels very active. Now at the minute, I just checked earlier, sag-wise, I'm only getting about 5mm on the shock. So I don't know what percentage that is, but yeah, it's probably about 10% sag, which is not very much at all. So if you're riding this down the trails, it's very firm. Now the fork, we just had a check there as well. What was that at? Can you remember?
125.
So that was 125 in the fork. And actually it does have a guide on there and it recommends, you've got better memory than me.
Yeah, it recommends about 80.
So about 80 PSI it recommends, so I am way more than the recommended PSI. For my type of riding, it really does make a difference and makes life a lot easier to ride this bike on this kind of stuff. You'd also be surprised that I actually run the rear shock fully open. I don't have it in climb mode or closed. I do find if I especially put it in closed, it really dampens the rebound quite a bit. And the rebound is actually something that, if you have it fast enough, really helps with this stuff. So by damping that, it actually makes life a lot harder. So I run the fork and the shock both fully open. Speaking of rebound, what do I run that at? So just had a quick check to see how I run the rebound of these things. And actually the rear shock I have fully open. So I have the rebound set as fast as possible. And we just checked on the fork and I actually have that pretty much exactly halfway, which still feels on the fast side. So these forks must have a lot of damping adjustment. And I think that's just about everything. I do run the front cable through the headset, so I potentially can do bar spins and foot jam tail whips and stuff, but I haven't actually done any of those yet, but the possibility is there. Can you think of anything else, Fraser?
Spoke tension.
I run, yeah, spoke tension, nice and tight. I like to have real stiff wheels for this, so the Light Bicycle carbon rims, they actually built these wheels themselves. They're one of the first sets of wheels I've been running that I haven't built myself. Holding up amazingly well, super stiff, ideal for this type of riding.
What gear are you normally in?
That's a good question. So I don't know. So it's a 28 on the front. Which one? I'm normally in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 24. So it's 28, 24.
Was that similar ratio, do you think, to your...
Well, that's the annoying thing because it's not quite the ratio that I run on my trials bike. It's slightly lighter, I think, so it's a slightly easier gear ratio, which is a bit annoying. I actually would love it to be exactly the same, but if I go one cog down, it's too hard, and this cog's too easy, so it's a compromise. So I choose slightly too easy. And that's what I was hoping by going down a chainring size to a 28 tooth, it might actually make a good ratio, because again, with the 30 tooth, I still was a compromise. So yeah, maybe I just need to try a 29 tooth or a 27 tooth to find that ratio. Shame you can't get narrow wide cogs in odd numbers. Can you think of anything else, or should we just ride this thing?
Ride it.
Cool. It's going to be as much a challenge for me as it is you walking and filming across this. Whoa. Yo, that was even better than last time I was here. See those panic hops then?
Go on.
That was weird, that flew straight up. I'm gonna go this way, I reckon. Oh, gutted. Right, well, we hit a pedal a little bit. I'm gonna carry on the line. Well, at least I'm gonna...
That looks so cool with the mountain in the background.
Oh yeah. Right, this is a big jump. There we go. I think that's as good a point as any to end this video. So I hope everyone likes this video. I've certainly really enjoyed making this one. Absolutely loved riding this bike. Loved having Fraser involved. Thanks so much. Having someone to move the camera and make it more dynamic, because filming this on a locked off tripod is so hard. I'd have to do everything like 3 or 4 times. So thank you so much. And please let me know down in the comments, do you like the new edition of Fraser the cameraman? Don't forget to follow Fraser on his social media platforms, link down below. Don't forget to follow me. Have an amazing week, and I'll catch you next time. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.